Welcome, welcome. Today we are jumping into how we can support our autistic kids, emotional well-being and social well-being. Thank you to everyone who's saying hello. But first of all, I would love to know if you are here, are you a parent? Are you a professional? If you are a professional, what type of professional are you? I'm actually here today at Selena's house, who is the COO of our Inside Out programs. And we were just talking about how we're so excited because normally majority of the trainings we do are for SLPs. Occasionally we do some trainings for parents, but today we opened this up for any type of professional. So I still see a lot of SLPs in here, a lot of parents, OTs, some other types of special educators. This is amazing. Social worker, really cool. So you are here because you are wanting to learn how to better support the autistic child or children in your lives. And today we're going to be talking about something that is so important and so often overlooked. And I don't think that this is overlooked intentionally. I think it's completely unintentional. And sometimes we just don't realize the connection and how deeply rooted a child's social and emotional well-being is in everything else that we do with them in their lives. So that's what we are going to be talking about today, as ways to support social and emotional development in our kids. You should have gotten a workbook for today. If you didn't, I bet Melanie, who's on our team, is going to drop it in the chat in about 0.1 seconds after I say that. So make sure to grab your workbook and you can follow along. We're going to be doing a couple of interactive things as well today. So first of all, here are the things we're going to be covering today. We're going to first and foremost talk about why this needs to be a top priority for you, whether you're a parent or whether you are a professional, why supporting social and emotional well-being in your kids should be a top priority. Then we're going to go into ways that you can foster social development. And this will all be in ND affirming ways, neurodiversity affirming ways, which we'll talk about as well. How can you support your kids' emotional well-being? And then last, we are going to be talking about creating a bigger ripple in the pond, which is how can we get teams on board? How can we truly make a difference? Because we know that as a one person show, sometimes that's what it feels like. It can feel really hard. So how can we make this easy for ourselves? So before I was just thinking about this morning, actually, as I was getting up, which was the first time I was about to present nationally. I was getting everything ready with the person I was going to be speaking with, who was Jake Greenspan. And if you're familiar with the DIR model or the floor time approach, Jake Greenspan is the son of Dr. Stanley Greenspan, who created floor time. And Jake worked alongside his father for many years. And then when Stanley Greenspan passed away, Jake has continued to run the Floor Time Center and do a lot of training. So this was really our mission, was how can we teach professionals to build, deeper relationships with their kids and really come at building speech and language from this relationships-based approach. And as I was getting ready to present with him and we're going over different kids we're going to be talking about, that was the first time ever I heard that I should not be writing eye contact goals. And this was a long time ago, and it probably took me 10 years after that to understand the why behind that, the neurodiversity affirming reason. But at the time, he was the first person to explain that to me. And it was more that there are so many ways that our autistic kids engage with us, and that's not always through eye contact. And I think my goal was like that she will make eye contact 3 times in a 1-minute period, or it was something like so arbitrary like that. But up to that point, that's what my goals had been. But the point is that we are here, and the point of today is how can we support our kids in neurodiversity affirming ways. And I know a lot of you who are here and you're professionals probably understand this very, very well. And we're going to tie that into how we can support social and emotional well-being in neurodiversity affirming ways. If you are still learning about what that means, the main thing that we are going to be talking about today is how can we support kids for who they are without trying to fix them, right? That's kind of the premise of neurodiversity affirming practices, is that our kids who are autistic, their brains are working differently. They're wired differently. You've probably heard the Mac versus PC example, right? So it's not that one brain is the correct way to function and one is the incorrect or broken way. It's that our brains work differently. And what that means is that we need to be able to support our kids in different ways because they're going to learn in different ways. So when this was just a couple of weeks ago, I actually posted a story or a video on social media about this because it broke my heart so much. And I still am just spiraling thinking about what I can be doing better for this family. But this little boy who's in this picture, he is 7. And he is non-speaking. He has the occasional word he uses here and there, but he communicates primarily with his AAC, which he just got like 2 years ago and has started using. And he just started a new class this year, as all kids did. And he is just the absolute sweetest boy, like one of my favorite kids ever to work with. He's just so sweet and loving. And he started this new class, and then kind of weeks in, months in, mom started to notice all of these changes in him. And these were really significant things, like he was coming home and he wasn't even wanting to play. He would just come home and he would sit and he would stare. He stopped feeding himself. Like his mom and grandma now have to spoon feed him. He stopped feeding himself. He started walking differently, like slower. He stopped he stopped using his AAC. He stopped wanting to play on his tablet. And even if like his mom would go to his tablet and turn on one of his favorite YouTube videos, he wouldn't click to the next video when it was over. He would just let it stop and play. And I had so many questions when I heard about this happening because, of course, we're not really sure what it is, right? And yes, we, of course, want to rule out anything that might be going on medically, like mom's saying the neurologist and all of that. But I was so much more concerned for his emotional well-being at this point. And I connected his mom with our autistic coach and mentor who works in our programs, and they're going to be able to chat together. And the first thing that the autistic coach said is, this is incredible that you, mom, are able to recognize these signs of autistic burnout from such an early age. And I mean, there were also things like in his class where they just had these crazy expectations for the kids. Like there was an activity that he had to be prompted through that took an hour and a half. Like what 7-year-old sits for an hour and a half working on one activity, right? So it's just so heartbreaking to see that things like this can happen. And for this little boy, he truly was going into this state of survival, right? And one survival state, I know a lot of people know flight, fright, freeze, whatever, all the Fs. And a lot of people don't know the state of survival, which is called fawn, which is essentially this over-pleasing. So it's just that we're too scared to say no because we're too afraid of the consequences. So we constantly say yes. And it becomes something that can be so ingrained into kids that they're not even doing it on purpose. They're not like, oh, my teacher is going to get mad if I don't do this. A lot of times it becomes such a reflexive, automatic stress response that they feel like they don't have a choice. They just have to keep doing the things and saying yes. And that's one of the things that is just so hard. And this is such a huge part of our job because obviously not only does this affect his ability to learn, but this is going to potentially affect him for the rest of his life. I mean, hopefully we are catching this early enough and mom is incredible and we're working toward a solution, and he got pulled out of school for anyone asking about that. But, these are things that can really affect kids for so long. And it's so important that we know how to support our kids because it's such a critical piece of their entire life. So we always talk about this in our Inside Out programs, is knowing your why. Why are you doing this? And I know most therapists just get into the profession to make a lot of money. Just kidding. Okay. We are all in this profession because it's a helping profession. We want to make a difference. And this is one of the biggest things that we can do to make a difference, is be able to support our kids' social and emotional well-being. And they're so tied together. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before I continue, I just want to say, for anyone, just trigger warning for anyone, we will be talking very briefly about some mental health stuff that happens a lot with autistic kids. So just wanted to give you that heads up. But why? Why is it so critical that we support social and emotional well-being in our kids? And this is why. And I call this the scary stats that you don't want to know, but you need to know, because it's one of those things where sometimes it's easier to not know. It's one of those things where there's a great quote from a song that says, "Life is sweeter at the bottom of the sea." When we are thinking about the things and the horrible things going on around us in the world, sometimes it's just easier for us to go on and live our lives. But it's so important for us to know how deeply our kids can be affected when they are not being supported in ways that are affirming of their identity and who they are. Okay, so here are some different stats for you, which is more than 30% of autistic adults attempt suicide. More than 60% of autistic people have considered suicide. 8 in 10 autistic people have a mental health condition. Okay, so these are the stats that you would rather probably not know, but is so important to know for our work, because we need to know that, imagine growing up, and some of you may have had experiences like this that you can relate to, but imagine growing up in a place where you didn't feel like you were being loved for who you are, where you were constantly being expected to change, where your parents or the people who are supposed to be your biggest supporters were the ones who were saying, no, that's not right. You need to act different. You need to be different. You're not doing this correctly. All of that stuff really takes a toll on kids. And at the end of the day, we just want kids to feel truly accepted for who they are. And that's the most important thing. We know that all of these expectations we put on kids can lead to masking, whether that's intentional masking or not, which is someone trying to hide their autistic traits, to try to kind of look more like their neurotypical peers. And masking has very, very detrimental effects on emotional well-being and a person's mental health, and definitely not something that we want to be encouraging our kids to do. Obviously, this is not like a 1-minute conversation, but yes, there are a lot of autistic adults who say that they choose to mask in certain situations, and we won't get into all of that right now. But the point is that we don't want our kids to feel like they have to mask when they're around us, when they're around the people who care about them the most. So I have a question for you guys. Okay, what do you think parents want for their kids? Like, if they could choose one thing for their child, what would they want? Let me know what you think. You guys are killing it. Okay. These are all amazing responses, by the way. Like, I'm not saying there's one right answer, but I will say that the number one response when you ask parents, what do you want for your child, it's happiness. You want them to be happy. And in a world where I need my kid to get into Harvard, sometimes it can be really easy to forget that the main thing that we want for our kids is happiness. Yes, we want them to be safe. We want them to be independent. We want them to feel worthy. All these things you guys are saying are amazing, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to happiness. Are our kids happy? And, I don't know any parent who wouldn't give up. Well, I don't know if that's kind of like a big, broad, general statement, but I would say majority of parents would not choose for their child to, yeah, there probably are. I'm laughing because I'm sitting right here by Selena. There probably are some parents who would choose that. Maybe it's not that they meant to, but most parents would want their kid to be happy over anything else, over like getting into college, the college of the parents' dreams or something like that, right? But we want our kids to be happy. So where and how can we do this? How can we make our kids happy? And what does the research show? The research shows that happiness ultimately, maybe some of these things, yes, contribute to happiness, but ultimately happiness does not come from a child achieving success or different milestones or getting ribbons or winning competitions or going to a good school or from eating healthy or from exercise every day. Yes, those things give us, lots of our maybe give us some short-term, happy dopamine, all of that stuff. But ultimately, what does the research show that makes us happy? And does anyone know this? Because there's a lot of famous studies, one in particular that was the longest study that ever looked at happiness, which is, what is the number one thing that makes us happy? You guys are putting in some good answers in there. A lot of people saying connection. And you are right, okay? In some of the longest research they have done on what makes a person happy, the answer is that the people who are the happiest loved someone and they were loved by someone. Okay, the happiest people love someone and were loved by someone. And how beautiful is it that it's that simple, right? I mean, that's pretty incredible. The number one indicator of happiness is, does this person have positive relationships in their life? And the reason that I say, love someone and be loved by someone and separate that into two is you really have to think that relationships are not a one-way street. Like you can, I'm thinking of like my obsession over like Jonathan Taylor Thomas and like, all the people you love growing up. It's like that's a one-sided relationship you have with that person. Relationships are not always two-sided, but in order for people to truly be happy, they have to be a two-way street where the love is mutual, the connection is mutual. And you can see why it is so critical then that we know how to support a child's social development and emotional development, because ultimately having positive relationships is caused by a person being able to have that social support. And then the positive relationship creates this emotional feeling of support. So they are really tied together so strongly. So let's talk about some ways that we can support social development in our kids. And again, these are all neurodiversity affirming ways, meaning the goal is not to try to make the child fit into their neurotypical peers. The goal is really to help them to socialize in a way that is going to be comfortable for them and in a way that is going to meet the goals that they have for their own social development. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is this. Okay, I made this picture, but not made, threw together a couple images from Canva. I want you guys to guess, what do you think these people are fighting about? Give me your best guess. Okay, We've got some dishes. We've got this angry couple. It's very messy. They're piling up in this do your part, says Rebecca. Ooh, Selena, shared responsibility. This is so fun. Being overstimulated, that's good. Not sharing household duties. Okay, so you guys are really all right. Tell me if you have had this argument with your significant other. Okay, and it goes something like this. I thought that you were gonna do the dishes. You didn't ask me to do the dishes. I didn't think I needed to ask you. I thought you would want to do them. You thought I would want to do the dishes. I'm not going to want to do the dishes. I will do them, but I don't want to do them. Okay. Does that feel familiar to anyone? Okay. Kaylee says yes. Okay. So the point of this is that you cannot want something for someone. You cannot make someone want something. Right? And we always learn that the hard way. But no matter what you do, you cannot make someone want something. They have to want it for themselves. And the reason I bring this up, oh, Danielle knows where this is going. The reason I bring this up is because this is why we have to focus on Danielle. Yes, you got it. Focusing on intrinsic motivation. This is why when we are thinking about how can we support our kids socially, we really need to start with what is intrinsically motivating for them. Okay? Because you cannot make someone want something. You cannot, I'm going to my partner Chris's holiday party today for he's also an SLP, you guys probably know. So we're going to his holiday party at his school today. And if he were like coming to me saying, okay, by the end of the night, I need you to have made friends with these 5, teachers or therapists or anything, I would be like huffing and puffing showing up to that party. I'd be like, who is he to tell me who I'm going to talk to at this party? I'm going to talk to whoever I want, right? And chances are I'm going to probably do something like the opposite, right? So you cannot make someone want something, especially when it comes to social. The point of social interaction is the feel good component, right? It's I'm going to build a relationship with this person. It's not if I do this with this person, then I'm going to get this out of it. It has to come from within. And one of the most common things I hear from therapists or anyone truly, and I can't like pretend like I've never said this about a kid before, but how often I hear people say, he's just not motivated. Like, oh, well, no, he doesn't want to make friends. He's just not motivated. Okay. And this is something that just makes me cringe now, knowing what I know about how motivation works, right? Because behavior is always motivated. That's part of the definition of a behavior. So a person can never be unmotivated. It's just they might not be motivated by what you want them to be motivated by. And that's a very important a way to distinguish one from the other, okay? So maybe I am not motivated to go and make friends with the principal of the school tonight at the holiday party, but maybe I'm very motivated to go have some champagne, okay? So it does, just because I'm not interacting with that that principal and I'm over hanging out drinking my champagne, that just means I'm motivated to do this right now. It's not that I'm unmotivated, right? And we see that so much in our kids, which is like, oh, well, he's not talking to his peers. He's not motivated. Well, no, he's not motivated to talk to his peers over there, but he's very motivated to be talking to his online friends right now on his phone, which is what he's doing. Okay, so we have to think about, what does this mean? And how can we build intrinsic motivation in our kids? And I know people don't like to hear this, so I'm sorry in advance, because it really messes with us as educators, especially, and parents, because this is how we've been trained. But external rewards, things like a first then, like first you're going to do this and then you're going to get this. So anytime you have an activity linked to a reward, that actually decreases motivation over time. So the more you reward a child for doing something, the less they are going to want to do it in the future. So if I start saying, eat your broccoli and then you're going to get some chocolate cake, will the child eat the broccoli? A lot of kids will do it. Okay. So I'm not saying that it doesn't work short term, but it is a compliance-based approach. The goal is not, I want the kid to enjoy this broccoli. The goal is, I want this kid to eat this broccoli, right? Because if your goal was to get the child to enjoy the broccoli, your approach would be a lot different, which would probably be like, oh, let's dip it in something. Let's try it this way. Let's make a little tree out of it. Let's have it, right? We would like do a lot more fun things if that was truly our goal, to get a kid to enjoy broccoli over time. So this is really, really hard for us. And I'm not saying that these can never be used or that they should never be used or that I personally don't use them. If you guys don't know, I also have 4 children of my own, and sure, there's a good time. There will be times I will throw in a first then because we are getting out the door and I need everyone in the car right now or else we're going to be late for something, right? So sure, there's a time I'll throw in a good, get in the car and then I'll give you a pack of gummies. Okay, so I'm not saying never to use them. I'm just saying that we really don't want to tie rewards to learning experiences. And, just for those of you who are here and you're in classrooms and you're teaching and you have a big class and lots of lessons to get through during the day, I'm not saying that this is the same as a visual schedule. I realize that, a lot of teachers really benefit from using visual schedules so that kids can see the order of the day and things like that. Okay. But the point of this is that we want to, whenever possible, if our goal is learning, to try to step away from using an external rewards-based system, because ultimately it may be getting the child to comply, but it's not going to make the child more motivated to do that thing in the future. So I'll give you an example because I know my ex-husband is not going to watch this webinar. Okay. But this is what he started doing this year for my son, who has anxiety, by the way. Okay. He started using a reward system for him talking to kids during recess. And I just lost it because obviously anyone who doesn't know you is more likely to listen to you than someone who knows you really well. That's just how life is. Okay. But I lost it. I was like, okay, I'm speaking about this for 3 hours in a couple of weeks. This was a long time ago, because I used to do full talks only on motivation. Can you please listen to it? Okay. But the point is you cannot reward a kid for these social behaviors, because all that my son was thinking about when he was getting those stars for talking to kids was what toy he's going to get when he gets enough stars, right? It was not oh, it would be really cool to have more friends and have deeper relationships, and that's going to be great for me. Was not going through his mind. It really takes the motivation out of that social interaction and it puts it on something completely different. So as much as we can, not trying to use a rewards-based system and focusing on what is really intrinsically motivating for kids. Okay, so you might be asking, if I can't do this, what can I do? And that's where a couple of these things we're going to be talking about comes into play. The first is the power of autonomy. Autonomy is one of the biggest intrinsic motivators that exist. And that is just, we all want to feel like we've got a little bit of control over ourselves, right? If I said to you, would you rather have a job where your boss comes in every morning and they say, okay, I want you to see these 3 kids first. And then during that 15-minute break, I want you to write the report for this kid. And then for the next 5 minutes after that, you can go to the bathroom. And then after you come back from the bathroom, I want you to call this parent. And then I need you to, right? Would you rather have a boss that's like, hey, here's what you're doing today in this order for this long, and here's where you need to be here at this time? Or would you rather have a boss that said, hey, Here are all the things we need you to get done this week. I don't care when you do them. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if you're working from the office or you're working from the beach in Hawaii on your computer, but I just want them done. Okay. And that's one of the biggest motivators for us, is just that sense of control. And yes, I realize that kids can't always have control. And I'm a huge fan of setting boundaries and expectations for kids as well, but allowing them to have as much control over things whenever possible. And that's all I'm saying, is trying to give them more sense of control. And a lot of the times we don't even know what a child necessarily wants or what they want to control, because we just don't give them that ability to decide. And there's some great research by Erin Finke. Actually, it was one of our first shows. Maybe we can find it. It's the show we did was called The Secrets of Autism and Friendship. And it just talks about the differences between a lot of autistic friendships versus neurotypical friendships. And like, for example, I might be more likely to call a friend and have them come over just to sit on the couch and literally do nothing. Okay, who's into doing that? Right? But an autistic person is more likely to want to have a friend that they can go do an activity with. So there are things that we need to know. Well, what is more motivating for this person? Do they want to hang out with their friends in person, at school every day? We have a lot of autistic young adults and adolescents making really, really good friends online. We have a lot of kids who would rather text their friends than call their friends. We have a lot of adults nowadays who prefer that too, right? But the point is, give them as much autonomy whenever possible in whatever capacity you can. And of course, if you're a teacher and you have 20, 30 plus students in your classroom, that's not always going to be possible, but there are a lot of ways that we can build autonomy that really helps it helps you to see where their motivation lies. Another thing that we can do to build intrinsic motivation is when we are working with kids, placing demands on them to make sure that we are giving them the just right balance. And I found this picture, thought it was perfect, right? But we never want to make the demand too low or too high. Too low, it's going to be boring. We're going to lose their attention. Too high, it's going to be stressful. We're going to lose their attention. And fortunately, as therapists, this is something we have a lot of training in, is how can we know how much demand to put on a child when? And I always say that this is more of like the art to our job than the science. This is like, you got to really know your kids well. And not only do you have to know them and how much of a demand they can take at that moment, but you also have to know how demanding the thing is that you're trying to put on them. Right? But giving them the just right balance, or creating the just right balance, so that when you are doing things with them, it is not scaring them away because it's too overwhelming and it's too many steps and it's not causing them to shut down. So kids and people, another huge, huge motivator is making progress. So slowly being able to master skills. And you can think about this even for yourself. Like, there might be something, say you're into bowling. And every time you go bowling, maybe not every time, but you slowly get better over time. If you continue to just go bowling and you just never saw any improvement over it, you would probably be over it and you would probably stop doing it. But if you are seeing those slight improvements over time, it makes it really motivating for us to continue to come back to it. So being able to set up these opportunities so that the challenge is just right, and kids are not just completing the activities, but they are progressing a little bit more every time, that makes them more motivated to come back as well. So let's talk about special interests. And, some people use the term high focused areas of interest. But this is one of the things that I don't know why I get so intense about, but I just feel like there's such a culture of us quickly labeling kids' special interests as obsessions and then just trying to shut them down and make them do other things. And that's just not the right approach, right? This is like something that the child loves so, so much. And we did a whole episode on special interests with our autistic SLP friend, and she talked about how she has special interests that started as a child and she still has them to this day as an adult. She talked about how they might be cyclical, they might kind of come in and out of their lives, or one special interest might take a backseat to others for a while, but never entirely goes away. And when you are really observant over these and what your child or the child you're working with is interested at the moment, this is like the time to go all in on that. This is the time to really help them to get even more into it if possible. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so here's what the do's and don'ts of what we can do with special interest. Okay, which is we don't, and I know what someone's gonna ask. Someone's gonna ask, what if their special interest is watching YouTube? Just wait. Someone's thinking it if you didn't ask it. Okay, that's what I always get. I'll get to that in a second. So what we don't want to do with special interests is limit them, discourage them, try to change them. Like so often we might be like, oh yeah, you love that. Well, I went here the other day and there was a dinosaur at this theme park. And now let's talk about this theme park because you wanted to talk about dinosaurs, but now I talked about a dinosaur at this theme park and now let's shift, right? Like that's something we do a lot, which is, oh yes, enthusiasms. That's what I think Barry Verzant calls special interests. So it's so easy for us to want to try to limit and discourage. And I think that's just because of the way that we frame them. We frame them as, like someone just wrote in the chat that a teacher called them obsessions. And obsession has a term, unless we're using it in a way we're kind of making fun of ourselves, right? Like, oh, I'm obsessed with XYZ. But it really has more of a negative connotation when we talk about it like this with our kids. And what do we want to do with an obsession? We want to squash it. We want to limit it. We want to minimize it. We want to decrease it. Usually you're not like, yeah, let's feed into that obsession. So this really is about the way that we frame it. And we really do want to encourage kids' special interests, appreciate them, and even cultivate them. And I grew up with someone was very, very close to this girl growing up, and she loved more than anything computers. And she would take computers apart, she would put them back together. She sat in her room for hours and would do this. She had a hard time making friends early on. And then in high school, she found all these other computer lovers and then started going to, I don't know if you guys know this term, or this is like a back in the day when you used to hook computers up together, but it was called a LAN party. That sound familiar to anyone? Okay, and all of a sudden she had this incredible group of friends. They all had the same interest, which was computers, went on to go to a huge tech school, went on to start a company where she is now designing robots. Okay, so this is the perfect example of like her parents could have been like, get out of your room right now. You have been on that computer for hours. And I'm not saying this was a touchy one, I guess, because screen time is so I don't even like to say controversial because I don't think it is, but a lot of people have different ideas of what boundaries and expectations need to be. But say her parents growing up didn't allow her to do that. Say they were like, no, you can only play on your computer 1 hour a day. Right? And no, you can't do this. You need to get out. You need to play with your friends. And as a matter of fact, there were periods in her life I know where she was really encouraged to do other things. Okay. But overall, her parents really fed into that, something that she loved so much, gave her plenty of opportunities to do it. Eventually, when she was in high school, she went to like computer and robotics, camps during the breaks and all of that stuff. And now look where she is today. And tell me a special interest and I will tell you how it can be someone's job. Like you can make a job out of almost anything these days. And this is something that I think that if we just changed our frame of reference on or our perspective, that there's so much that we could encourage our kids to do and we would see so many great things from them. But the main thing is here that our goal for our kids should be find their people, find their tribe. They're out there somewhere. And our goal is not, oh, here's this group of friends. I want to try to see how I can get this child to fit into this group of friends. It should not be that hard. It should not be where a child has to pretend like they're interested in something that they're not, just so that they're accepted into this group. I have a boy in my clinic who's young. He's probably like 6, maybe even 5, 6 by now. And he was having trouble making friends at school. He's really into space, astronauts, all of that stuff. And his teacher was taking an approach, which was trying to get him into other things, like the other things that the other kids in the class were interested in. But I talked to his mom and I'm like, are there any like space clubs? Like what's around that he could be part of, And trust me, there's like a club for everything these days. And when we go, we would rather be with someone we share an interest with than anyone else. Like if you go to a party, would you rather spend a couple hours talking to someone who was your same age and that was it? Like maybe just someone who was your same age, or would you rather spend 2 hours talking to someone about your most favorite thing in the world that is also their most favorite thing in the world? Right? Like it doesn't matter. The point is that we are really glued to each other and friendships are created based on mutual interests. So our job for our kids should not be, oh, let's make them like this thing so they can fit in with these people. It should be, let's figure out what they love so that we can help them find their people. And this comes back to the idea of positive relationships, right? Because when we have a kid in a group of other people and they all have the same interest, this is where they're going to get those reciprocal relationships. Thank you, Danielle. Danielle said you were speaking to my soul. I know I get a little intense about these things. Okay, so I want to do a fun little 2-minute activity, which was in your workbook, which is how well are you supporting your kids, if you're a professional, or your child, if you're a parent, their social development, and are you supporting them in neurodiversity affirming ways? So this is just a little, I want to say it's 5-question quiz that I made, and it's really just meant for you to use as a reflection. And the thing is, if you're a parent, you know this for certain, that we are not perfect. We are constantly learning. We are constantly catching us in things that we wish we would change about ourselves, and we are working on always. But so this tool was really created more as a reflection tool so that you can kind of think about the practices that you're currently using. Okay, so let's take a second and let's do this, which is I think on the 3rd page of the workbook. And if you don't mind, in the chat, oh no, it's the 4th page. Okay, it's out of order. If you don't mind, let us know out of those 5 questions, where do you think that you have the most room for growth? If you don't mind sharing. All right, so let's take 2 minutes. I'm going to throw on a song. So these are just all things to think about, which is, I love a lot of you guys are saying number 5, which is, are you open to collaborating with neurodivergent individuals, professionals, or support networks? And this is such a, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you the amount of like how much my life has changed from forming relationships and collaborating with autistic professionals, bringing autistic professionals into my own clinic to train my therapist, I know I mentioned earlier Chloe, but bringing an autistic mentor into our parent program who runs a support group for our inside out parents, really Good stuff. Okay. For the sake of time, let's keep going. Okay, let's jump now into this emotional development. We know that our goal is happy kids, which is created by having positive relationships. And this is really kind of a big web that is all intertwined into positive relationships make a person have a healthier well-being, emotional well-being. But it's also the other way around, which is we're more likely to reach out to other people and want to take part in those relationships when we are feeling good emotionally. So remembering what our big goal is to make our kids happy, make them feel accepted, make them feel loved. And I put up a video the other day saying that a lot of you probably saw it, which is saying that, you know, our main goal in therapy shouldn't be communication. It should be supporting a child's emotional well-being. And it's kind of funny because I think a couple people didn't get it and they commented like, well, how can we not support their communication? And that's not the point. The point isn't let's not support communication. Of course, we want to support communication. But without supporting a child's emotional well-being, everything else we do is going to be harder or less effective. We know that trust is the foundation for learning, and a lot of you had mentioned this earlier in the chat, is the importance of safety. Kids have to feel safe in order to learn. It's how our brains are wired, and it's neurology. This is what we need. We need to feel safe in order to learn, and trust is going to be the foundation for everything that we do with our kids. And Christy is really into this. Go, Christy. Trust. So validation is one of the easiest things we can do, but one of the hardest things to do. In theory, it is one of the easiest things is to validate a child and what they're going through. But in reality and in practice, it's one of the hardest things that we can do. But this is truly something that just requires practice. And it is something you get better at over time. And it is something that the more well-regulated you are, the easier it is going to be to validate kids. And if you're a parent, there is a little bit of an extra layer of complexity to this because we are so connected to our kids that when our kids are upset, it's like it automatically hits this emotion center of our brain and it automatically triggers us to feel a little bit or a lot dysregulated, right? It's like when you put your baby to sleep and it's silent and then you hear one cry and then it's just, you have that feeling in your gut like, oh my God, very dysregulating. So it's a little bit harder because when your kid is dysregulated, you're a little bit more likely, if it's your own child, to feel that as well. But here are some really easy ways we can validate kids. And one of the reasons it's really important, which actually I'll mention that next. Okay, instead of, no, you can do it, it's easy, right? Yeah, that seems really tough. I can see you're trying really hard. It's the difference between saying, no, it's not that bright, to, yeah, it's sunny today, let's go get a hat. We never want to tell our kids how to think or feel. So we never want to say things like, you're okay, but we can say things like, I'm here for you, right? Because us saying, I'm here for you is not us saying, no, you shouldn't be afraid right now, you're fine, which is like the easiest thing to say as a parent because we hear it so much. But flipping that to say, I know it's frustrating, I know it's hard, I can see this, you're struggling, I'm here for you, can make such a huge difference. Oh, where is this little quote I have? It's a couple in, we'll get there, but we're gonna come back to this importance of validation, and truly the importance of validation is that autistic kids are experiencing the world in different ways. And we will never know what that is like. If your brain does not work like exactly like your child's, you will never know exactly the way that they're experiencing the world. And it can be really hard for us to validate something that we don't understand. But that is really the purpose of validation. It's not we are trying to say, I'm in your shoes and I know exactly how you feel. It's just saying it's okay to feel the way that you feel. And one of the greatest ways that we can support our kids' emotional well-being is just by modeling acceptance. And this could take place in so many forms, but something like if you're a teacher and you're in a classroom and you have one kid who really struggles to sit still and they're just bouncing always, or they need to get up and they need to stand in the back of the class to concentrate. It's as simple as just modeling what it is like to accept that we all have different needs. Oh, yeah, I could see that you want to move. Do you want to stand in the back of the class for a little bit? And this could even be talking through your own inner thoughts, like, okay, I'm feeling really antsy right now. I think I need to get up and take a walk. And just talking about how it's okay that our bodies have different needs. Had to touch a little bit on self-regulation because we know that this is a huge goal that we have for our kids, is them to have the ability to self-regulate. But there are a lot of myths about self-regulation, these being kind of the big ones, which is that self-regulation is something that we are just born with. And the myth that self-regulation is just a skill that just pops up one day, like, oh, my kid just turned 5, time for their self-regulation skill. You're gonna be self-regulated now. They just woke up on their 5th birthday or whatever it is. We have this idea that like, oh, well, it's gonna come one day and all of a sudden it's gonna be there. But the truth about self-regulation is that it develops over time, and co-regulation, which is when we are helping another person regulate, we are regulating together, plays a huge, huge role in our ability to develop self-regulation. The interactions that we have with caregivers are a huge part of a child being able to self-regulate. We don't just put a kid on their own. And I know like maybe sleep training, they're like crying it out, but like we're not just putting our kid on their own to deal with problems by themselves. Like you probably still call your mom on the way home from work to vent about your day. Okay, that's not something that goes away. The need for someone to help you regulate is not something that helps you go away. And we can put a link in our chat. Oh my gosh, Selena is so on top of it. We did a show on this if you want to learn more about it, and tools for doing this. But we really need to realize that in order to support our kids' emotional well-being, that means that we truly do have to validate them and we have to help them regulate. We can't just say, oh, you're upset, go take a walk and come back when you're feeling better. And that's not to say there aren't some kids who need their space, because I want to acknowledge that absolutely there are some kids who need space. Obviously, you got to do what works for your child and for the specific family, but what's important to know is that the need to co-regulate, the need to have other people to help us manage our emotions is never something that goes away. And it shouldn't be our goal to take that away from a child. Understanding a child's sensory differences can make a huge, huge impact on both their social and emotional well-being. And this is because up to 95% of autistic kids and adults have sensory differences. And this means that the way that the child, your client, is perceiving the world is different from the way that you are. And their experience in this world is very different than yours. And something that might be a very enjoyable experience for you, like going to Disneyland, for example, might be a very, very painful experience for an autistic child. And of course, everyone has their own sensory differences. Just because it's painful for one child doesn't mean it would be for another. But the point is that we need to understand that sensory differences play a huge role in how someone is experiencing the world. And this is one of my favorite things I ever heard from Chloe, who I've mentioned a couple times so far. And this was crazy because I interviewed her. She was like, I want to say 23 or something at the time that we did this interview. And she explained this to me so, so well, that our autistic kids are experiencing the world in a different way. And the reason why it's so important to validate what they're going through is so that we can help them to trust that what they're experiencing is real. Because imagine going into a place where you feel super uncomfortable and everyone is saying, no, but it's fun here. No, this is a great time. We love this. This is awesome. And you're in your head going, am I crazy here? Because this is like torture for me. What is happening? How is everyone having fun here? And when we aren't validating others' experiences, it's so easy for us to think, for us to cause a child to feel like they are not, like some version of their world is twisted. Like, are we in the twilight zone? What's happening? Okay, we need them to know that the way that they are experiencing the world is very real. And I remember specifically a story Chloe told me about how she always was sensitive to sound. And she used to say, her and her twin sister are both autistic. She used to say, oh, this hurts so much. It's so painful. The sound is so painful. And adults would constantly tell her, no, it's not painful. It's just loud. So she grew up thinking loud equals painful. And how crazy is that for someone to grow up thinking that? Like, no, loud is not painful. There is a difference between what can be loud versus what is painful. And we really need our kids to understand that the way that they're experiencing something can be very different from the way that another person is experiencing something. So now let's jump into that quick 5-question quiz on how well do you feel supporting your child or your clients' emotional needs? And that is on page 4 of the workbook. So let's take a minute to reflect on that. And again, if you're comfortable sharing where you feel like you have the most growth, I would love to hear. Okay, I love hearing all these and getting to read these. A lot of you guys said 1 also, which I know, I feel like that's tough for me, which is the actively listening without interrupting or immediately offering solutions. And that's such an important part of validation, is just letting someone feel without trying to move toward being solutions focused, which I know personally is really hard for me. I like to move from problem to solution as quickly as possible. And I know that that is a skill, not necessarily, and maybe not even always a good one. Good to feel our emotions. Okay. Selena just let me know that a lot of you guys were asking for all the random episode stuff that I've been mentioning, like shows and resources. So Selena is going to put together a resource roundup. So basically anything that I am mentioning outside of this, whether it's a show to watch, podcast, whatnot, we are going to email it, Selena. Selena will email you guys after with everything that I have been mentioning. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so now that we know there are some really, really simple, fortunately, very simple ways to support our kids' social, emotional well-being, what do we need to do now? And this is when, I don't know how this metaphor, tell me if this is a metaphor, started, the pebble in the pond. Okay, but we always talk about like, how can we make a bigger difference, right? Because if you're a therapist, you work with a lot of kids. If you're a teacher, you work with a lot of kids. Like there's a lot of people that need to be working with you in order for you to make the biggest difference in this child. Oh, sorry, guys. You don't have to put your emails in. We've already got a list of everyone attending, but thank you for starting. But no worries. You won't have to do that. We'll just send them out. So just make sure, as long as you are registered for today, which you all should be anyway, you'll get the link. So it's this idea of, you know, how do we throw a pebble into the pond, and instead of just having the immediate effect on this one area, how do we make a larger ripple? And in order to truly have an impact on our kids, we all have to be doing the same thing. And I like to give the example of, it's like when we have people who are using compliance-based approaches and then people who are using these other child-led, more neurodiversity affirming approaches, it's like we're all stepping into a rowboat, but some people are paddling this way and some people are paddling this way. It's not going to be as meaningful as we need it to be. And the number one way to make it more meaningful is to get the child's entire team on board. But that is also the number one concern, number one barrier we hear from people. We train thousands of people. We do presentations like this for thousands of people. That's the number one thing we hear from people is, but what do I do? Because no one else is on board with this. I'm the only one. And who feels like that? I know maybe things have gotten a little bit better, but let me know if you feel like you are that one person trying to make a change, or you're a very small group of people trying to make a change, and not necessarily everyone is on board with this type of approach. And that can be really hard. So I wanted to give you a couple tips for getting the team on board. This is what we have found the most success with in our team and our clinic, in the therapists that we work with. And I'll tell you, first of all, what not to do, because that's always fun, which is telling them that what they're doing is wrong. That's outdated. We don't do that anymore. No one likes that. Your way is wrong. Don't do that, right? Why? Why can't that work? Because a defensive mind is not open to new ideas. There's your neurology again for you, which is when we are feeling defensive, we are moving into a survival state in our brain, and we are not going to be receptive and open to new ideas. But it's so easy for us to want to be like, that's not right. Let's do it a completely different way. Okay, but by telling them they're wrong, all we're going to make is them defensive, and then they're not going to be open to new ideas. The other thing that we do is we get so excited about this. We're like, neurodiversity affirming, yeah. And then we give them like 8,000 things to do differently. And all that does is cause that person to feel overloaded, overwhelmed, and a person who is confused will never buy in. It's too hard. It's too confusing. Okay? A defensive mind is not open to new ideas. A confused mind never buys in. So it's very much a tactical way that we have to approach making this change. And sometimes when we are on this neurodiversity affirming train or this pathway and we're like all the way at the King Candy Castle, anyone get that? But then we've got some people on the peanut, what's it called? The peanut brittle. Okay. If anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's Candyland. Okay, but when we are like at the end of this path all in, and we are working with people who are still in the beginning of the path, that's the most critical time to talk to them and do it in the right way, because our goal, we can't be upset that they are still in the beginning of their journey. And it's very easy for us to get frustrated when people are here and we're here, but we have to realize that we all started here. And if our goal can be to get them a little further down that path, slowly they will make it there. Okay. Who has done one of these two things, by the way? I know I have. Has anyone ever said, no, that's wrong, or tried to give too many ideas at once? That's like my favorite thing to do with new families. I learned that the hard way. Such a hard way when new families come into the clinic and I give them like 80 things to do for homework. Okay. So what can we do? One of the best things we can do is we want to give someone something so specific and easy to do that is going to give them what we call a quick win. So if they do this one thing, they are going to see an immediate positive impact. And the easier we make it and the quicker we see the progress, the quicker that they are going to buy in. And sometimes we have this laundry list of things we want to teach them, and we think that we need to start at step one, but maybe step one is something that's so foundational and small that it's not really going to have the immediate impact that giving them step 5 would. Okay, so instead of thinking they need to learn all of these things and start with here and end here, think about what is the most powerful thing I can teach this person, or this one piece of advice that I can give this person that is going to have an immediate impact on what they're doing. And this could mean so many things. It's almost hard to give an example because it's going to vary depending on the context. But like, say it's a kid who is really needing a lot of movement during the day, and just having him take a movement break every 45 minutes, a quick walk, is going to make a huge difference for him. There's your quick tip. You don't even have to give a ton of explanation. Teacher starts doing it, starts seeing the benefit to herself and the entire class and the child. Quick win. Okay. Make it easy. Everyone is busy. Instead of saying, hey, I watched this great 90-minute webinar on supporting social emotional development, let me send you the link. Cliff notes. Be like, oh, I just learned this, and just give them a little bit at a time. Okay, so the thing is, as we know, that we can lead a horse to water, but we can't make them drink. Okay, so we want to make them drink. That's like something we want so badly to do, but it's not something that's possible. Okay, this goes back to that we can't want something for someone, they have to want it themselves. So you have to realize that your goal is not to make them drink, it's to get them to the water. Okay, get them to the water. That is the best thing that you can do. And the way that you can do that is by having a bunch of resources that you can share with them that are so easy to use and so easy to understand and so actionable. Here, take this, do this, learn this, try this. And then it's going to be so easy for them that they're going to want to do it. And right when they do it, they're going to have such a positive experience with it. They're going to be buying in and coming back for more. But I want to acknowledge that sometimes this just feels really overwhelming. Okay. Sometimes it just feels like too much. You're just one person. And I have personally experienced this where, I had this little girl I was seeing, and I was getting really frustrated that I wasn't seeing the whole team come together. And she had this massive team, teachers, ABA therapists, which we won't get into, swimming, groups, music, whatever the therapy was, all the therapies and all the things. Okay. Massive, massive team. And one day I went to her school to observe her. And it was just like one of the worst feelings I've ever had after that, because I just watched her with an aide being rewarded for sitting still, and she had to work to get her sensory fidgets. And it was this whole thing. It was like so hard for me to watch. And I got back into my car after that, and I had this like moment where I was just like on the verge of tears, because I was thinking, I went into the school thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to do amazing things for this girl. There's so much that her team needs, and I can't wait to see her in school because I'm totally missing this. I don't get to see this, and we're going to be able to make such a great change. And I remember just sitting in that car about to cry, thinking like, damn, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was. And I don't know if I have it in me. Like, I really, in that moment, was like, is it worth it? Can I do this? It's too much. I'm just one person. I felt like I was this little fish swimming upstream. And it's like not just swimming upstream against the current, but like sharks coming at me. It just felt like not only am I the one team member doing this and all the other team members are doing this, but it was like the educational systems and how education is structured and all of these things that I felt like I had very little control over. But I decided in that moment that no matter what I could do, even if it was a tiny baby step, had the potential to make a big difference for her. And this is where we really have to put it back into perspective, because in that moment in the car was such a overwhelming feeling of like, this is too much and it's too big. But this is where just like focusing on what the next step is makes a huge, huge difference. And knowing that there is a way to make this easy and create a step-by-step process for training teams. And this is what I decided to do, which is this little girl, and working with this entire team inspired me to create this library of resources, because what I was finding was that, first of all, I needed to talk to them about why we shouldn't be using external rewards. We needed to talk about her sensory differences. Like, there were so many things we needed to talk about, how to help her co-regulate. And I was like, I cannot have this conversation with 20 people, right? She has all of these one-on-ones. She has all these different therapists. It's her parents. She has nannies. She has grandparents who help take care of her. I can't have this conversation this many times. And that's just a few of the conversations I needed to have. I was like, I have to make this easier for myself, and I have to make this more accessible for everyone else. And that's exactly what I did. Okay, so what if I told you that you could train an entire team in just a click of a button? And the reason I'm telling you about this is because this is something that I created for this little girl, which we continue to use in our clinic today, which is a complete library in training others in a neurodiversity affirming approach, with different sections that you can use and share videos. So this person you see here in this video is my friend and colleague, Jamie Boyle. She is an autistic SLP. We flew her out to California. We filmed all of these videos that are essentially very short training modules to send to teams to help them understand neurodiversity affirming practices. So how Autism Support Resources works is you get to pick, here is the area of need that I really need. So for this little girl, it was, we need to talk about intrinsic motivation, why we shouldn't use rewards. We need to talk about her sensory differences. We need to talk about co-regulation and this crazy expectation they had for her of self-regulation. So you get to pick what it is that you need to target, go into this library that we have of resources, you pick one and you shoot off the link. And this is what I did with this little girl's team. And she had about 30 people on her team. Is I would come up with the number one area of need I saw at that moment and send these short training videos, research articles that are very, very short, easy to read, over to her team to help get them on board. And in Autism Support Resources, we have these mini training videos, as well as a huge PDF of resources and these what we call full resource libraries. Everything is shareable. So it's not like it's something for you to just take and learn yourself. This is meant to take and share with as many people as possible on the child's team, but make it easy so that you don't feel like you're having the same conversation over and over. We'll put a link in a second. You guys can really look into all the different topics, but these are all the topics that we go through in the entire thing, which is neurodiversity paradigm, the language that we should use, strengths-based approach, developing language, sensory processing. These are just some of them, okay? These are the topics that you will see in there. And one of my favorite parts is that in a few different modules, we have contributions from autistic colleagues and friends of mine. So this is Jamie, who you saw, autistic SLP. Chloe, I've been talking about this whole morning. She's an autistic coach. Sam is an autistic SLP, and KJ is an autistic advocate as well. And they just have really, really incredible, meaningful contributions to this. So we decided that for the holidays, we were going to throw this on a flash sale. This is normally about $400. Autism Support Resources, but we decided for the next 3 days, we're going to make it $199. So if you want to grab this while it is only $199, feel free to use that link there in the chat. Again, the reason for this was to make life easier. And this was something I started making for myself. And as I was training different therapists from all over the world, we're all having the same problem, which is and parents we're working with as well, which is we want so desperately for our kids to have everyone on their team on board with the same practices. But sometimes it just feels like you're swimming upstream, feels like this huge mountain, and it feels like, and I could tell you because I own a clinic, and this is what our therapists were doing before this existed, which is they were spending like all their time in between therapy trying to like grab like, oh, here, I need this resource from this place and I need this to send to this person. It was like we were just sifting through piles and piles of information on the internet, trying to figure out what we could use to educate. And that's exactly what this is for. You literally open it up. The whole PDF is clickable. If you want to share the entire thing with teams, you can, but that kind of goes back to this point about not wanting to overload people. So if you don't want to do that, which I personally wouldn't recommend doing, but it's possible, is you can hop in there, you click like one either lesson to send people, which comes with all of the different resources, or you can just choose one link within a lesson and send that, which is personally usually how I would do it. Yes, you get lifetime access to this, so you get to own this forever. If you are a therapist, then this is meant to share with any kid you're working with, their entire team. So share it with their parent, their teachers, other therapists you're working with, you can use. If you're a parent, you're welcome to use this and send it to all of your child's therapists as well. I have some other questions I see. How do I feel about ABA therapists within therapy within this framework? Okay, let's try to address this. Is this good for preschool teams? 100% amazing. There is no age limit to this, so it was specifically designed so that it could be used for and benefit kids for any age. Is it updated? That's such a good question, Emily, because I was just thinking about how we will have updates for sure in the future as things change. I would love to. And we also have done things before for anyone who owns this where we invite them to live calls as well. And we'll probably do one in the new year as well, so that we can talk more about getting teams on board and just how to better use it. You also have a video when you purchase it, which is a video of me telling you how to get the most out of it. Okay, ABA within this framework. I'll keep it brief, which is it depends, because there's a lot of behavior therapy that's called ABA, but when you look at the way that they are doing the therapy, it's not ABA. It's more like play-based therapy. So I'm just saying this because I work with a lot of parents, both in our clinic, we see hundreds of families a week, but also online. And a lot of therapists might call themselves behavior therapists, but really they're just play-based therapists. So it's almost impossible to answer that, but I would say that if we're talking not specifically about ABA, but just in general compliance-based approaches, I would say this is something that's very different from that. And I'm not going to lie, it can be really hard to get to come to someone who's so used to their reward systems and token systems and try to get them to move away from it. But that has always been my goal, and we've been really successful with that, working with teams in our clinic. And once we can get parents on board, that's when the change is made, because the parent has the ability to dictate what their child's therapy is going to look like. So when we can get a parent on board and they know what they want their child's therapy to look like, for us, at least in our clinic, that's where the greatest change is made. Do we have an episode on intrinsic motivation? I wonder if we do. We'll put it in the chat if we do. And yeah, I can easily speak to, this versus compliance-based therapy. It's obviously very, very different. And yeah, so I just want to say thank you guys for being here today. As you can probably tell, this is something that is such an important topic to me. The idea of supporting our kids and supporting their social and emotional well-being. It's such a critical thing that we often overlook, but is something that makes just such a world of difference. And the last thing I'll say is that the other benefit to switching to this type of approach is that it's gonna feel better for you. And yes, it's going to be amazing for the child and their lifetime, but it really feels better for you. And I can say that, and we've probably all been there when we've been in situations where we don't feel like the actions that we're doing are necessarily in alignment with the things that we feel. And we've probably all done compliance kind of based therapy where it just didn't feel good. Like we don't walk away feeling good. And the best thing is that when we walk away from an interaction with a child where we know we are doing everything that we can to support their emotional well-being, it is such a good feeling knowing that we are doing something that aligns so much with what we believe in. So we'll sit on here for a couple more minutes in case you guys have a few more questions. I'll just throw on some music. But thank you guys for being here. We are going to send you a resource roundup with everything that we talked about today. And this flash sale for autism support resources is going to last 3 days. When does it end, Selena? Monday?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. We've had a bunch of you guys purchase already. Yay. Well, what are their names? We'll give them a shout out. Fatima, Cassie, Liz, Emily, Wendy, Jody. I'm just gonna make a song out of all your names. So thank you guys so much for being here. Yay, happy weekend, and let us know if you have any questions.